All right, so Ezra, usually he comments on the third. This year he comments on the third aliyah. So this is about the third aliyah. So I think. All right. Okay. So he said after Jacob's encounter with Laban, he continues his journey towards his father's house. Hashem reaffirms his protection of Yaakov with angels meeting him, marking the second encounter. The first being in a dream of angels ascending and descending a ladder. Aware of the imminent and potentially dangerous meeting with his brother Esau, who has threatened to kill him, Yaakov sends messengers with gifts, a common practice in ancient times to seek reconciliation. Yaakov, fearing Esau's anger due to past events, aims to show goodwill and respect through this gesture. On the night before the encounter, Yaakov prays alone and wrestles with a man until dawn. Despite sustaining a hip wound, Yaakov persists and refuses to release the man until blessed. The man changes Yaakov's name to Israel, signifying a spiritual transformation and a new identity as the Prince of God. Yaakov believes he has seen Hashem face to face and has been preserved. The Torah uses the term Elohim in this context, emphasizing that it refers not exclusively to Borei Olam, I'm not sure, creation of the world, but also to earthly rulers, aligning with passages in Exodus. This episode highlights Yaakov's spiritual struggle, transformation, and persistence in seeking divine blessing, foreshadowing the role of the nation of Israel in biblical history. It underscores the importance of prayer, perseverance, and divine blessing in the lives of believers. So that was Ezra's creator of the world. Bor Olam, Bore Olam. All right. And this, and then I guess I could do my drash. Yeah. Okay. So Shabbat Shalom again. So this drash, there's so many different things that you could be talking about, right? So I wanted to talk about the kind of the ending part where Rachel died, and our sages say that our sages point to the reason of her I guess early death, or like not, didn't live like a full life, in response to what Yaakov said in the previous portion. So back in Vayetze, Lavan hunted him down, or not hunted him down, but raced him down after he had left Lavan's house, secretly. And he was afraid that Lavan was going to keep him there or hold him there or something, and so they ran away secretly. And we remember Rachel taking an idol. It says an idol, but there may have been more than one. And then when Lavan caught up with them, he asked, "Why did you leave so suddenly?" And they were like, "Because he was pretty honest. He said, "Because I felt you were going to keep me there, whatever." And then he said, "Well, why did you take my idols from me?" And Yaakov said, "There was no idols. We didn't take any idols. You can search everybody. Whoever, if you find whoever you find the idol with, they will die, or they, that kind of thing." It's here. I mean, the exact words here in Genesis 31, verse 32 says, "The one with whom you find your gods shall not live." And so he said this oath, or he said something very, I don't know, rash, serious. No, it's a serious thing, very rash. Didn't really think it through, probably. But in any case, he said such a harsh thing, and then yet the person that did take it did receive some consequence from that, right? So later on, we see, that Rachel, died during childbirth at a fairly young age, And so it wasn't immediate though. It wasn't immediate that happened, but it was, it did happen that she passed away. And so, our sages look to that and say, be careful of what you say. Obviously later on it does say don't take oaths, these other things. But this was before that. And our sages say, well, this is like the first instance of kind of like, don't be taking oaths, don't be saying things that you're not sure of. And I want to tie it into, there's another interesting thing about Rachel. She was also buried away from the rest of her family, essentially. All of her ancestors were buried in the cave of Machpelah and Hebron, and same with her husband and her sister, and even Bilhah and Zilpah, the concubines, were also buried there. So it was like she was the only one that wasn't, And of course, we hear about this later. She was like kind of like an exile, like maybe the first exile in a way. And in Jeremiah, or the prophet Jeremiah later on talks about it, or writes about it and says, that she weeps for her children, the exiles of Israel, So he kind of tied her into that. Kind of nice. But it really comes down to like, what are the words that we are saying? We got to be careful of the words that we say. And even Yeshua, our master Yeshua, tells us, don't take an oath, nor shall you make an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. But let your statement be yes if it's yes, and no if it's no. So anything beyond these is of evil. So Yeshua also teaches us that we should be careful with our words, and also I like to. It always remind me of what Rabbi Schneerson, the Rebbe, said. He didn't like to use certain words. He thought they were kind of negative. They had like negative connotations. So one, I can only think of one. There are some other ones, but I can only think of one, and it is he said he doesn't like to use the term deadline, like when there's something to come up. This is the deadline. He doesn't like to use that. Instead, he liked to use the word due date, which like is a positive thing. Deadline is about death. Due date is about life, baby being born, that kind of thing. And so he did that with many other. There's a few other words that he would like not want to use in his vocabulary. He liked to only use positive things. So then I would also encourage you all. Yeah. No, baby. And so he also encourage you to be careful of the words that you're using. Be careful of the words that come out of your mouth, because they could have bad experiences. They could have bad things that happen from them. Hashem gave us this power of words, and I say we use them for good. Say good things, say blessings over people. Don't be stingy with your compliments and good words to other people. And that's my little Josh. No, it's not open mic. Safa has it. Not Safa. Avadi. Yeah,
I have to go up there.
Come up here.
Okay. Shabbat Shalom. In this Torah portion, Esau was heading toward Jacob with 400 men. So you would think, so you would think he was going to go battle it out with Jacob, but he doesn't. Instead, Esau had a sudden change of heart. There are a bunch of possible reasons for this, and I'm going to tell you. Maybe it was because Maybe it was because Jacob sent a bunch of goats, ewes, rams, camels, cows, bulls, and donkeys to him as a peace offering. Or it's because he had all that time away from Jacob that his anger had died down. He had forgave him for everything he did. And lastly, perhaps it was just like the Midrash where angels were attacking Esau. In this Midrash, Esau cried, "Don't hit me, I'm the grandson of Abraham." Yet they still insisted on beating him. Then he cried out, "I'm the son of Isaac," yet they still persisted. "I am the brother of Jacob," he wails, and upon hearing that, they stop and say, he is Jacob's brother. He gets full protection. Of these three explanations, this last explanation can give us an important lesson. It's what the Midrash explains as Jacob's attitude adjustment. The lesson is, while there will always be an Esau, God will always be there for us to send an attitude adjusting message.
Okay, this is my bat mitzvah portion, and there was something that I was going to talk about something else, but there was something that that struck me that I thought that I would rather talk about, which was in the Haftarah portion. It was a Haftarah portion, yeah, a Haftarah portion. Verse 19, it says, and the inhabitants of the southland shall inherit the mountain of Esau, and the inhabitants of the plain, the Philistines, and they shall inherit the field of Ephraim and the field of Samaria and Benjamin. So we're talking about the inhabitants of Palestine and excuse me, the area where the Palestinians lived. And there is a lot of misinformation today that that basically says that there are such a people such as Palestinians. And even though Palestine right now is named Palestine, and we know that the word Palestine comes from the Hebrew Pelishtim, and that the area was first called that, I think was it by the Ottoman Empire who ruled over that land, or was it might have been a different empire before that, but they didn't name that area Pelishtim or Palestines because there was Philistines living there. They named it to spite the Jewish people who lived there, who they conquered. And so, but now Palestinians are saying that that yes, that they were there even before Israel. But the truth is that Palestinians are not native, I'm talking about Arab Palestinians, are not native to that land in general. They are of Egyptian and, they are descendants of many different Arab people around the land. The only people that we know of that are native to that land are Jews, not just rabbinic Jews, but I would also say Samaritans, which are not Jews. Samaritans are not Jews. Samaritans were the northern tribes. They're not Jews because they never joined with Judah. They apostatized, and so they were never considered Jews. They were considered Israel, but they were not considered Jews. And there's a big attempt to rewrite history. And there are a lot of hostages, as we know, have been recently freed. And people want to say and declare that the war is over, but we should not. It should not. There are actually a lot of Orthodox, godly Jewish rabbis and other leaders who are upset that many people want a ceasefire and peace right now because there are still hostages being held by Hamas. And if we were to stop fighting now, we would basically be surrendering, and we have no business surrendering because Hamas, as I said last week, is a worse enemy to the Jewish people today than the Greeks in the times of the Maccabees. And even Esau is considered here an enemy of Israel in our Torah portion. But what Hamas is doing is far worse. than what even Esau did. And even Esau in our Torah portion made peace with Yaakov. Anyways, there's a 9-year-old girl. Her name is Emily Hand, and she was released. But when she was released, she had suffered so much that she thought that she had been in captivity by Hamas for a whole year. She told her father that they weren't allowed to speak out loud, and she learned how to say be quiet in Arabic so as to not give away that, she was one of the captives. 12-year-old Itan Yahalomi, another person who was a hostage, said that when the kids cried, Hamas threatened them with weapons. So they learned to hold it all in. The children were not even allowed to cry. The hostages were held deep in underground tunnels. And I would like to remind everyone, if you didn't know yet, the underground tunnels that Hamas builds is funded by aid that the rest of the United Nations, including America, give to Palestine in order to bring relief to their people, in order to give them food, in order to build them houses, in order to give them hospitals and education and schools and stuff like that. But instead of doing those things with the world's money, they build terror tunnels to attack Israel repeatedly. And this did not start on October 7th. This has been going on for years, many years. When we were finally acknowledged and given acknowledged by the United Nations and given autonomy to rule ourselves in Israel, that is when all the Islamic world decided to wage jihad on Israel again. And we're always reminded, oh yeah, Muslims and Jews, they lived in peace. Yes, lived in peace. Just like once upon a time, Jews and Christians were at war with each other. Now it's flipped, okay? And the hostages were held in these tunnels funded by the United Nations, including America, sometimes alone and sometimes together. They were beaten with sticks, only given plastic chairs to sleep on, not allowed to shower, and had to wait for hours to use the bathroom. The hostages who came home, and you're not going to hear about this in the mainstream media, but the hostages who came home were found to be suffering from severe malnutrition and lost 5 to 10 kilograms of weight on average. One lost 20 kilograms, which is 44 pounds. And they explained that they were only given one meal each day, consisting of just rice, sometimes bread, sometimes nothing. When they were held together, the men would give their portions to the elderly and children to keep them alive. Itan, the sensitive little boy who was captured alone, told his parents that the terrorists forced the children to watch an hour of horror footage from the October 7th massacre. So not only were they taken as captives, but they had to relive the experience of their abduction and the murder of their friends and family. The same footage that Israel showed in closed screenings to select journalists and politicians, many of whom ran out midway through in tears. But children were forced to watch it. When Itan was brought into Gaza on the back of a Hamas motorcycle, he said that civilians came out to see and they all happily beat him. Civilians, Gazan civilians. And we talk about how Israel, oh, we shouldn't be harming the Gaza civilians. Oh, Israel is shooting innocent civilians. Any Gazan civilian that is on the side of Hamas is guilty of what Hamas did. If they are not taking sides with Israel, then they are just as guilty as the terrorists. And not by merely standing by and doing nothing, but even contributing to the torture of the children. And of course, it's not all civilians. There were many civilians and Israelis that lived peacefully side by side. But there is so much indoctrination by Muslim imams about how we should be at war with the Jewish people and Israel and all the West. And I don't believe in separating politics from religion. When it comes to Israel and when it comes to the values of the Bible. Separating politics and religion means deeming religion powerless over politics, but it is our religion that should rule over our politics, because politics is meant to rule over the people, but it should be our religion, it should be our faith in God, it should be the Bible that rules over our leaders. And if they're not, the politics is going to be corrupt. So that's why I'm talking about this right now. Okay, so the civilians of Gaza had the chance to save Ron Crivoli, but instead they turned him into Hamas. They turned him into Hamas. Ron was being held alone in an apartment building, and when it was bombed by the IDF, he took the chance to escape. He wandered around for 4 days trying to find his way to Israel, but Gazan civilians, ordinary people from Gaza, found him, and instead of turning him back to Israel, where he would be safe, they brought him back to Hamas to be tortured. Alma Avraham, an 84-year-old hostage woman, elderly woman, was fighting for her life in the ICU, and she desperately needed medication. Her family begged the Red Crescent to bring it to her, but they refused. Red Crescent is like the Red Cross for, I don't know if it's for Palestinians only or for Muslims or whatever, but Yafa Adar, the 85-year-old Holocaust survivor who was amongst the first to be released, said she had begged Hamas to release Alma and other elderly women before her who are barely still alive. Hamas so far only released hostages. Okay, this is very important. Hamas so far only released hostages who still have family members in their hands. I'm not sure how you know this I'm not sure how old this is. It's kind of changed since then, but when they were first released, this was the case. They released hostages who had family members that they still held, some of them, hostage. And to top it all off, right before they were released, the hostages were given their first shower and change of clothing in over 50 days. This is exactly the same kind of propaganda that the Nazis did, during the Holocaust. They made it seem like they were treating the prisoners of the Nazi camps well. When media came, they showered them, they let them play, football and soccer and whatever on the fields, as if they were all happy children and people in the camps. Oh no, they're not being tortured here. No, it's the same thing that they're doing. They were given showers right before they were released so they could look decent in front of mainstream media. Then they were forced to smile and wave at the masked Hamas terrorists for photos. A propaganda display that an international public that is happily eating up. The Gaza civilians didn't get the memo though. They chased after the Red Crescent vans that escorted the hostages out of Gaza, jumped on the vehicles and banged on the windows to terrify the children in one last display of barbaric cruelty. Is your blood boiling yet? Because mine is. This was written by Ruria Ifune. She is a journalist who lives in Beersheba, Israel, and she's the co-founder of Or Chabad. She is a religious Jew. So as we continue to, hear and listen to and watch stories, about Israel and about Gaza and about Hamas, we need to understand that what is going on right now between so-called Palestine and Israel is no less different than what was going on in Nazi Germany during the Holocaust. It is no less different, maybe on a smaller scale, but maybe on a smaller scale only now. But the truth is, this is not about Israel. I'm from the Philippines, and Philippines generally stands with Israel. So does India. India generally stands with Israel. Why? Because in our southern border in the Philippines, we have a large Muslim community, and they're doing the same exact things that Palestine is doing to Israel. The larger they grow, the more numerous they grow, the more they insist on Sharia law. And in order for them to receive it from the Philippine government, They bomb us. They bomb us. That's how they operate. That is jihad. You won't hear about that kind of jihad, maybe, if you talk to a normal Muslim here, but we're experiencing it in the Philippines. They've experienced it in India. That's why India had to separate. Because when, and it's the same story in India, just like the British government released Israel and formed Israel and Palestine, right, and gave autonomy to the Jewish people over what they called Israel. Britain also did that in India. They released autonomy, and they gave the Indian people back their land. But the Hindus, the Muslims in India said, no, we don't want to be ruled by Hindus. And they waged a war also against the rest of India so that they could have their own country. There's a lot less propaganda involved because, it's not, the history is different between the Muslims and the Muslims in Israel and the Muslims in the Philippines and the Muslims in India. But this is not just about Israel and Palestine. This is about the enemies of Israel versus Israel. And this is the story of Jacob and Esau. This is the story of Ishmael and Yitzchak. It's the same story. So don't buy into the propaganda. The stories that are being told in the Bible, in Judaism, we say that the deeds of the fathers serve as portents for the sons, meaning the things that happen to our forefathers, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, it's prophetic and it applies to us. And from what I see, it's worse when it comes to us. In the Torah portion, we don't get we don't really understand why Hashem was so much against Esau, right? It seems like Yaakov did everything wrong. He cheated his brother, he deceived, and he did all these bad things. But God knew Esau's heart. He knew what he was capable of, and he knew what his descendants would become. And this is why Jacob had to have the blessing. He had to have birthright. And that's what we see in the Haftarah portion. The Haftarah portion is when we see the evil of Esau in his descendants, finally. And we continue to see, I think, even to a greater degree today.
Oh man. And we live in this land where everybody's supposed to get along with each other, but we know that doesn't always happen as well. So we have to be on our guard, unfortunately, especially as Jews. But speak out, fight, but if they come to us, we will defend ourselves. And also, like the stories that we hear, the stories that my wife just told about the bad things that Mashiach was doing. Unfortunately, they also have these negative stories that they talk about how Israel treats their people and their children, and they're spread all over. So they have a lot of criticizers on that side as well. And so, oftentimes it's just a propaganda, but it's believed, it's shared, it's spread around. We gotta fight against the propaganda.